Chapter 17, back in New York, fresh from Florida, twisting around again and again and again, Archer goes to visit Mrs. Mingott, Ellen and May's grandmother, the colorful matriarch of this clan. He goes and he explains how he'd run down to Florida to specifically request a shorter engagement, and he had been rebuffed. And Mrs. Mingott, in very much her colorful way, scoffs at her relations, her family. These Mingotts all alike, born in a rut, and you can't root 'em out of it. When I built this house, you'd have thought I was moving to California. Nobody had built above 40th Street. No, says I, nor above the Battery either, before Christopher Columbus discovered America. No, not one of them wants to be different. They're as scared of it as smallpox. Ah, my dear Mr. Archer, I thank my stars I'm nothing but a vulgar spicer. But there's not one of my own children that takes after me but my little Ellen. She broke off, still twinkling at him, and asked, with the casual irrelevance of old age, "Now, why in the world didn't you marry my little Ellen?" Ooh, she's a wily one. You can see the independent streak and the disdain for convention that both appeals to Archer and repels him at the same time. You can see those two things that have personified themselves in her two granddaughters, May and Ellen. The question she poses at the end suggests that the prospect of Archer and Olenska getting together isn't necessarily so out of the question. Perhaps the grandmother senses something, has seen something, has always wondered about something. This is a very small society. Perhaps she had been, even looking from a very young age for Archer, thinking, well, all right, that young man, even if he's only 10, might be a suitable match. But she's just sort of watching from afar with this. The question of it, however, lands that, they would be. Now, she is the unconventional member of society, but she is still a powerful voice in society. So there is that tantalizing prospect that maybe it would be accepted. Maybe in any other situation, it would be fine. And maybe it could still be salvageable. The ideal is out there, and it is maybe within reach. It's not just a figment of Archer's mind. In other words, it's not just a fleeting, weird and completely out of the realm of possibility fantasy, or is it? We're again sort of shifted into that liminal space of insecurity and being unmoored ourselves. The impertinence of the question presumably causes a bit of a blush. He's pretty good, we have seen, about keeping his poker face going. But his only response that we are given access to is to come off with a little flippant response. For one thing, she wasn't there to be married. A reminder that as a very young girl, Ellen was taken overseas and went on her gypsy-esque life. And perhaps he is also defending himself there, like, well, I would have if she had been here. But it also, there's a certain casual, off-the-cuff quality to this remark that is, again, performative. That is superficial. That is the sort of flippant, casual repartee of tea time conversation that you can see him being such a master at, and that so many in his set have to be. The superficial that the superficial exchanges that don't necessarily reflect any interior truth or sincerity of feeling is the currency of this society. His response is entirely behavioral, that we can see. Readers are given no real access to his thought in this exchange. There's a kind of objectivity to it, a forced objectivity to it. The irony of the situation, however, builds on that. The dramatic irony. We know something that, in this case, the grandmother doesn't. That he has these burning desires for Olenska, and he hasn't been able to act on them. The heaviness of that is just building under the scene, even as he's trying to keep a placid and pleasant little face on it, which is so much of what this society is about performing a kind of insouciance, a sprezzatura in the Italian, where everything is just very lightly handled and nothing is particularly concerning or nothing is troublesome. It's the lie of that is poisoning Archer or is poisoning that society for Archer. He just can't stand it anymore. He needs something more authentic. He needs something more real. But still, he's able to play that game. The bulk of Minget's speech appeal to Archer's and the reader's more egalitarian sentiments, but Archer is at bottom a slave to convention. He would likely resist the spirit of change that the grandmother represents here. The shocking nature of the question, however, at the end, it calls attention to this curious dynamic of him being split in half between these two figures, between these two modes of life. The innocent society maven that is May, and his place in that very conventional, buttoned-up society, and also that spirit of adventure, that spirit of experience, that spirit of authenticity that Olenska represents. But also, you have to admire the genius rhetoric that this little speech demonstrates, where she goes through the whole bit, essentially currying favor with Archer and the reader, and suggesting, well, all these people, they're all stuffy, and they have no imagination. They can't think of anything, and they'll never do anything that's outside the lines, But she is a woman who has come from relatively common stock, and she has forged her own path to a degree, and other people have followed her. So she does this again. She flaunts the convention of just, politely siding with her family here, and she kind of cuddles up to Archer a little bit and saying that, well, yeah, they're all just a bunch of fuddy-duddies. But then at the end, she twists it and comes up with that question that suddenly spins him around and realizes that she is pinning him down, that she is somewhat accusing him, that she is putting him on the spot in a way that he wasn't anticipating because of that setup where suddenly they're, kind of simpatico. The conservative bashing of the first half takes a little twist at the end, and again, we are left unmoored. We are put, as readers, and certainly in sympathy with Archer, we are a little bit unsettled by the sudden twist, by the unpredictability of this woman and her situation. Ellen enters soon thereafter, though. The question is repeated, still no access to Archer's thoughts. Ellen announces that she is moving. Archer invites himself over, and here, okay, you know, she's on the move again. She's only been in town for a little while, and she's bounced around a little bit between upstate and down in the city and all this stuff. So, you know, she's always on the move, very gypsy-ish. Again, the prospect of going to visit her, he wants to have a conversation with her. He wants to, you know, say some of the stuff that he didn't get to say up in the Hudson Valley, and say some of the things that he's thought about since then. So he's like, oh, you know, she's going out, and he knows that, well, it's Sunday night. She's going to that Struthers woman's place, and I don't particularly want her there. It's bad, you know, that Struthers woman. It's a little too colorful. His conservative side coming up himself. But he plans his visit, says, okay, well, she wants me there early so that she'll have time to go to this party afterwards, so I will show up deliberately late. I'll say I'll be there at like 4, but really I'll come at 7, you know, and good luck doing that with women. But he does this. He thinks that it'll keep her away from that party for a little while, perhaps dissuade her from going altogether. It'll keep her away from Beaufort, who will probably be there, and he's always looking to drive a wedge between those two. So he's got some ulterior motives here. He's saying one thing, thinking another, interior life. But when he shows up at her house, predictably late, as he had planned, he finds that she already has some guests there. There are already 3 people in her little parlor, and one of whom he knows, Ned Winsett, is there, who is a next door neighbor apparently. Again, in the dicier section of town, down 23rd Street, but also that's a signal of her authenticity and what he likes about her. Winsett is an intellectual. Winsett is not, you know, a member of high society, but he's very authentic, and he's a free thinker, if you will. And the fact that Olenska and he would find one another and have this independent relationship, independent of Archer, is notable, I think, because it reinforces all of these characteristics that she is attracted to. The other character, the other male there, is turns out to be a doctor, we come to know, of sorts. Doctor, who knows? He is a quack associated with an upstate utopian community, which were all the rage in the 1900s. There were several notable ones throughout the Northeast. Communal living, isolated locale, freedom from convention, lots of free love going on, financial and economic egalitarianism, essentially communism, a lot of that going on. And he's just one of those people who has, is sort of followed members of society around, and you get some support that way. Always on the hook for financial support to support essentially a communist endeavor. But the third member who is in that room is a woman, and at first we're not told who she is. This lady, who was long, lean, and loosely put together, was clad in raiment intricately looped and fringed, with plaids and stripes and bands of plain color disposed in a design to which the clue seemed missing. Her hair, which had tried to turn white and only succeeded in fading, was surmounted by a Spanish comb, and a black lace scarf and silk mittens, visibly darned, covered her rheumatic hands. This is classical character description in the tradition, very minute, very before you let anybody speak, you have to know what they look like, and all the details of their dress and their facial features, their exterior features. We get an image of an aging woman, a little bit frayed at the edges, which is fine, but something more than just she's letting her hair go a little bit. She is a bit of a mess, I guess would be the term for it. She has that Spanish comb, Spain, giving a sense of European flair, again perhaps kind of a gypsy-esque quality to it. Everything's a little worn at the edges. Perhaps it was nice once, but it's getting a little bit old. There's an awful lot of information going on in there. The reflection of the age is a reflection of her class, which is also starting to get a little worn. Perhaps her temperament as well, a little erratic, a little bit frayed. We're getting this rigidly objective narration practiced throughout this chapter, this whole section, where we're sort of pushed back a little bit, and we're not really getting in on the subjective view from Newland as much in this. This is just what this woman is coming at him, and he's taking in all of this information and trying to put it together. It turns out that this is the woman who raised Ellen Olenska. This is her kind of kooky aunt who picked her up and carried her off to Europe when she was a young child, and instilled in her all of her gypsy tendencies, all of her somewhat chaotic ways. She's a bohemian crackpot, Medora Manson. She's kind of a crackpot. Medora Manson, with the Spanish comb and black lace scarf, silk mittens visibly darned, covered her rheumatic hands. Age starting to fade, starting to be a little bit down and out. Not what she once was, like the exterior stuff. So you're reading into that in a couple of different ways. She has picked up Dr. Carver, who's the quack, the nut job from upstate, and she is presumably the money he is sniffing after right now. They all engage in some polite chit chat. Dr. Carver is making his pitch. He gives out a very ornate business card to Archer. He has a little word with Medora, who wants to thank him for all of his support for her niece, for Olenska, but also wants to impress upon him that the Count, Olensky, back in Europe, very much wants his wife back. Not necessarily in a marriage, but he wants somebody presiding at his table. He wants somebody to fulfill the duties of a wife in a social, completely insincere way. Medora is perhaps interested in this. She is curiously enamored with the wealth that Ellen would have if she went back to her husband, the Count. She is curiously avaricious for this stuff that she is sacrificing by staying away from her husband, and by pursuing the divorce or not, just staying away from him. And for somebody associated with essentially a commune, this can be seen as a little hypocritical. The information that gets imparted through all this is that the Count wants him back, and wants her back, and is perhaps making some overtures to the weak spots in the family, most likely Medora. Ellen enters the room, and everybody's getting ready to move. But chapter 18 picks up with the other guests leaving and going to this party that Archer didn't want her to go to begin with, and he gets what he essentially wanted, which was a one-on-one with Ellen. They talk about this new revelation that her husband wants him back, and every word is so weighted, every word is so pregnant with meaning, and they're just trying to get through it, and you can feel the passion beneath every word that each of them are saying, but particularly Newland, who is quite frankly just bursting with this stuff. Archer tells Ellen about May's suspicion of him loving another woman. Again, the use of irony is very powerful. The unspoken love sort of throbs just under the surface of the scene, and the narrator's refusal to address it directly parallels the obligations of propriety that are exercised in this society. The idea that, okay, we're just not going to talk about it. It's there, but we're not going to address it directly. So they dance around the topic until Archer says, "May guess the truth," he said. "There is another woman, but not the one she thinks." Ellen rejects this opening, but he continues, "But you are the woman I would have married if it had been possible for either of us." That's quite the declaration. That's quite the admittance. He's basically coming out and saying, I love you. I am in love with you. And my engagement to May is kind of a sham. And it's not something he wants to do. She pushes back. She says, "And you say that when it's you who've made it impossible?" He questions this. She fires back with, you, she cried, her lip trembling like a child's on the verge of tears. "Isn't it you who made me give up divorcing? Give it up because you showed me how selfish and wicked it was, how one must sacrifice oneself to preserve the dignity of marriage and to spare one's family the publicity, the scandal? And because my family was going to be your family, for May's sake and for yours, I did what you told me, what you proved to me that I ought to do." "Ah," she broke out with a sudden laugh, "I've made no secret of having done it for you." She has given him credit, we are told repeatedly throughout the last few chapters, that, she listened to Newland's advice, and she is not going to pursue the divorce. And she is now throwing that back at him because she feels attacked by him on these very grounds, as if it were up to her to reject that offer. Now she feels like, wait, now you're blaming me. This is a lover's quarrel. This is the kind of conflict that arises in a marriage, little misunderstandings. They have been trying to read one another so many times and failed to really get at it, because reading one another is almost impossible because these superficial qualities are so opaque. Ellen denies any sense of the scandal connected with that letter that had so upset Archer, and that she only cared that it might scandalize him and May, the damage to the family, their institutional value in their society. Her defense is that her behavior must be interpreted, and yet Archer has misinterpreted it. This is the tragedy of propriety. Based on the unspoken, everything that they don't express directly, all of the inauthentic living that they do, all of the inauthentic society that they engage in, frustrates and in fact makes impossible the kind of truth that they're now confronting, that they are in love. The conversation is the first frank exchange that they've ever had, that we've seen them have. The passion of their love shows its interior, and the truth of the anger and resentment as well. This is real love. This is real. This is a real relationship. This is an authentic joining of souls, or at least meeting of souls. Something that Archer does not have with May. She's just kind of a blank slate, and he's indifferent to her. Archer groaned out loud. "I don't understand you." "Yet you understand May?" He reddened under the retort, but kept his eyes on her. "May is ready to give me up." "What? 3 days after you've entreated her on your knees to hasten your marriage? She's refused. That gives me the right." "Ah, you've taught me what an ugly word that is," she said. Great little exchange. That word "right" recalls Archer's nascent concern with women's rights. The whole conflict between right and obligation, between individual rights and the social contract. This is Archer's essential conflict right now. He's ripped between these two instincts, between his ability to just be a simple, conventional member of society, going along, doing what he has to do, and his desire, his sense of what's important in the world. He can't let go of that. So he's ripped between these two instincts. The telegram arrives at a fortuitous moment. May is telling Ellen that grandmother's intercession has helped and convinced her parents that they can move up the wedding after all. So Archer has just said that, well, because of social convention, May has said that, or May's refusal to move up the date gives me an excuse. But now that excuse, also in social convention, is no more. The wedding has been moved up, exactly what he does not want. 2 minutes after he has told this other woman that he's in love with her. But now he has nowhere to go. Now he has no options. Significantly, the chapter, which is the end of book one, the entire first half of the novel, when you're deep in the heart of the drama, ends with Archer's sister and an objective view that doesn't take his perspective in. And it's a mistaken perception on her part. "Oh, Newland, how wonderful. I'm so glad. But dearest, why do you keep on laughing? Do hush, or you'll wake Mama." Is he laughing? No. I think perhaps he's sobbing, or maybe he's laughing in a kind of existential release. Like, I just don't understand it anymore. He's given up. The world is cruelly comic to him, or comically cruel. It's not really certain what, but he is just a pawn in this bigger game that he finds absurd. His emotional state, however, really can only be guessed at. We're not really given any access to it. We are looking at him through his sister's eyes. His sister is kind of a fool. The first half of the book ends on this note of despair and confusion, and an acute understanding of the limitation of realist art. We don't know what's going on in him. We think we do, but it's based on imperfect, superficial impressions.